What makes a font look good? Fonts are sort of everywhere. Now, obviously, a word is a word regardless of its font, but typography is interesting in that the way a word gets communicated is largely subject to its font. If you take the same word and put it in different fonts, its entire vibe can change. This is a font styled after Butts, by the way. Every time I watch a movie, I'm very much reminded of this, where the font that gets used in the title card is almost as important as the title itself. So I started digging a bit deeper into it, whether it be through Netflix documentaries or exploring around online and seeing what kind of styles were out there. But ultimately, after all my research, I think I've stumbled across a few key factors that will make you look at fonts a little bit differently. The things that make up the building blocks of the things that surround us every single day. Number one, context is key. Not every font works everywhere. The reason some fonts feel perfect in one spot but totally wrong in another is context. So just like us, fonts often find themselves occupying specific jobs and roles. Display and script fonts are big, bold, and decorative. They're perfect for headlines, posters, or basically anything meant to grab attention. Long paragraphs though, no, your brain won't like it. Next, serif fonts. The classic ones with little feet at the end of letters. They're readable, trustworthy, and they feel smart. They're perfect for books, newspapers, or basically anything you're going to read for a while. And third, sans serif fonts. Essentially, they are clean, simple, and modern. They're great for apps, for websites, for signs, basically anything where you want it to feel approachable and easy to read. Interestingly though, a lot of us intrinsically know this, even if we can't really put it into words. The thing is, for most of our lives, we've been surrounded by typeface design, and so after a while, you sort of subconsciously start to learn to expect certain fonts in certain kinds of places or scenarios. But because of that, it makes fonts surprisingly sensitive to change. Even tiny adjustments like spacing or boldness can make a font feel completely different. The main takeaway, a font only feels good if it's doing the right job. Think of it like a car. A sports car is awesome on a track, but pretty stressful in traffic. But while the right font in the right context is important, we also need to talk about the fonts themselves. Number two, the devil is in the details. Whenever you look at any word, regardless of its font, there are a few things that have already been taken into consideration, namely strokes, spacing, and kerning. Let me explain. Alright, so letters have thick and thin parts called strokes. If it's too heavy, it feels clunky and overwhelming. If it's too thin, it feels fragile and hard to read. But if it's just right, it feels smooth, confident, and effortless. Even subtle adjustments can make for a huge difference when it comes to strokes. Next up, letter spacing or tracking, essentially the space between letters. If it's too tight, then letters blur together and your brain stumbles. But if it's too loose, words feel oddly disjointed. Perfect spacing lets your eyes glide naturally across lines of text. And third is kerning. Kerning is the spacing between specific letter pairs to make it flow better. You don't notice kerning when it's done right, but your brain definitely picks up on it when it's done wrong. And when you see bad kerning, something feels off immediately. Fonts that look good aren't just aesthetic because they are actually meticulously engineered. Every little curve, every little gap, it's all designed to make that font feel as effortless to read as possible. Typeface designers spend a lot of time and energy trying to perfect these ideas of strokes, spacing, and kerning. They also have a lot to worry about when it comes to the small details, such as the heights of different letters, the ratio of the height and its width, and even how you sometimes need to make a letter asymmetrical to make it look symmetrical. But during the research process of this video, I also learned that another frustration that typeface designers encounter is that as much as a font might look perfect on paper, as soon as it starts going out into the real world and starts getting used in different kinds of contexts, that whole thing can quickly start falling apart. Number three, fonts in the wild. Fonts aren't just for screens. The same font that looks perfect digitally can behave very different when it's out in the real world. And so while fonts need to adhere to larger ideas like context, as well as finer details like stroke and spacing, there are a few final rules that get applied when something is translated into a physical item. First, scale and legibility. In this case, size matters. A font readable on your phone is maybe impossible to read from 10 meters away on a street sign. Designers create slightly different versions for large-scale use, which makes letters wider, the spacing gets increased, and strokes become heavier. For example, highway signs are almost always sans serif because clean, simple letters are instantly readable at speed. Next, medium and material. The materials that words are made of influences which fonts work best. For example, thin fonts might look great on a mock-up, but once they're cut from vinyl and stuck on glass, tiny gaps disappear and letters start breaking apart. Designers compensate by choosing fonts with thicker strokes and more open shapes, so everything survives the physical process. When it comes to logos on caps or uniforms, you can't really rely that much on delicate details. Fine strokes and tight spacing turn into blobs when thread is involved. So fonts used here need to simplify their shape. They use wider spacing and they use heavier weights to stay readable. Fonts for neon or LED signage are often chunkier with fewer details so that they don't turn into unreadable light soup at night. Finally, branding and mood. Elegant serifs signal luxury or tradition, and rounded sans serif signal friendly and approachable. Fonts in the wild are not just judged by style, they're also judged by perception and function. And so with all of this taken together, I'm honestly impressed that typeface designers manage this at all and that good typography exists out there, because it's a lot to deal with, and this is one of those topics that can get infinitely deep, and we're sort of only really touching the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the world of typography. But with some of these basic ideas, I hope it gave you a little bit of a different lens with which to look at the things we look at every single day. So with all that being said, I hope you found it interesting. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.